Welcome back to the 2024 World Series of Poker. It is time for the epic conclusion of the 10K Deuce to 7 Triple Draw Championship event, event number 29, with 3 players left in the hunt for a bracelet. And it is an epic clash between big names of the mixed game world. Mr. Phil Ivey, you might have heard of him. He hasn't won a bracelet in over 10 years. He now wears glasses and a bucket hat, but he can probably still do it. Jason Mercier also has not been around much the last couple of years, but he is back for number 7. And Danny Wong, a regular for a very long time in the mixed games, he is also here battling it out. And also, he is our current chip leader. My name is Remko Rinkema. Donnie Peters back in the booth, and we have a special guest, a man who finished 6th in this event, so he'll probably have some interesting insights into the play of these players. Philip Sternheimer is joining us for some analysis. We are live on PokerGO.com, on Pluto, on Freebie, also on YouTube for the very first hour of this stream. So if you want to watch the full final table tonight, please make sure to subscribe to PokerGO.com. This is a 1-hour preview for our YouTube fans. And there it is. Phil, first of all, I have to ask you about the bucket hat. What's up with this? Have you commented on this? Have you gotten any sort of playback from Ivey on his new style?
I have not. I think he tends to wear it when he's on the big stage. I'm not the biggest fan, but it seems to be working for him.
It's a great way to block those bright lights from the stage. You can see that his eyes are in the shadows here. For those unfamiliar with this game, we'll dive into the specifics, the rules, and how you can win at this game over the course of this this final table live stream. These guys played 3 12 to 14-hour days to get to this point. They could not close it out late last night, so they bagged up their chips, and here we are back on the horseshoe table to close this out for the win. Phil, you were deep in this event. You said you had a bit of mixed feelings trying to follow along with this tournament. What is it like to be on the sidelines watching these guys play?
You know, I think as most poker players can relate, it's sort of a little bit bittersweet. I think when you made it deep yourself, and then you get eliminated shortly before the big prize, you know, it is a little bit traumatic. So I couldn't get myself to watch too much of yesterday's coverage just because the pain was still too raw. But I did catch a little bit of it, and it was the parts that I watched were fascinating to watch just to see the differences in styles.
Yeah, so let's talk about styles here for a second. What are things you picked up on from the limited stuff you watched? And when you say styles, like how do you sort of define that in a game like this?
Yeah, so it is a game that is not completely understood when it comes to solvers compared to, let's say, No Limit Hold'em or Pot Limit Omaha. So there's sort of different interpretations in terms of which cards you would discard on which street, you know, whether you should hold on to a pat hand or whether you should draw further. And based on a couple of hands I saw yesterday, you saw differences in, for example, how Ivey would play or someone like Jason. And then there's of course, a lot of creativity in there in terms of, you know, how and when you would snow, and then, you know, which hands are good bluff catchers or not.
So that's a good thing you bring up there, the word snowing. Time for us to dive real quickly into the rules of this specific format. You get dealt 5 cards. There's 3 rounds of draws. It's a limit format game, so limited betting amounts are allowed in this game. The best hand you can make is 7-5, 4-3 deuce. You don't want to make a straight. You don't want to make a flush. The goal of this game is to make the lowest possible combination. As Jason Mercier here chiming in on.
Or that you gave
50,000 was here.
Some missing chips
I know, but
here. What's
what
going
did I
on?
start the day with?
I don't know.
Can we get that count?
Mercier here, wondering about some missing chips, perhaps. Something got lost in the mix here. Mercier started with 2.95 million. Ivey with 2.26, according to the stats we have on the screen. Excuse me, 1.6, and Wong on
2.955.
Are we going to play and then we just figure 50 out and leave it? Huh?
I'm not sure.
So it looks like Jason feels like his stack is off based on what he thought he started the day with, minus the 2 blinds that he put
I'm
up.
50 short. 6, 2 million, 2.5.
You were in the big blind and the small blind, 250.
Yeah, 150.
150, yeah, 150.
This is
2-5.
always a little bit dicey in tournaments
Are you sure you
because
counted
the
right as
amount
well?
that you
Maybe
declare
no, so I'm even more
that
short,
you
so maybe I
ended the
counted
previous day with
They
is
could've counted
self-declared. And so
No,
we had
they're
a
not gonna recount
really
that
odd
either.
What were the-
situation
what
in
were all
another
the
tournament
counts?
where someone's stack was off.
Yeah, of course.
The short stack was off by quite a
2,
bit.
6, 5, 5.
And it's just very difficult to verify that.
Unless I counted wrong.
Yeah, other than the
Can you
like
show
the
me what
WSOP main
counts
event
were?
final table, they rarely verify. Like they'll obviously
if they
verify
don't
for
add
that
up,
because
then
of
I
the
just
stage
made a
that it's
mistake,
on,
obviously.
the money that's on at stake. But other than that, like Phil said, I mean, it is you have to self-report. And you could write the wrong thing. You could come back the next day and be like, I think I'm short, but you might have been off a number.
It would be a great angle if it was binding.
Donnie, please go over to Jason Mercier and tell him that he's wrong. How's that going to go?
This is interesting, by the way, here, guys. So, and we saw this yesterday. I think that Wong at some point started to play back against Jason's opens. So he 3-bet with the 8-7-4, which is really a little bit out there. You know, it's a hand that doesn't have a deuce. It could make a straight with the 5-6. We'll see.
Most likely Rizzo is
if pitch to 9 here.
Most likely.
And then Ivey wakes up with a very premium hand.
Nobody,
you know, deuce
nothing
3-7, the best 3-card hand, plus the 7 blocker.
Fine.
But this is going to be interesting here.
I'll overcome it.
You'll be all right.
Ivey's over it.
Yeah, he's ready to go. Ivey wanted to finish the tournament yesterday.
Of course. I ran into Jason Mercier, I think with 1 level left in the night last night when we finished our freeze-out event on the YouTube stream. And I said to him, how's it going? He goes, I'm really tired. And I'm like, oh, you guys are almost done? He goes, yeah, but I want to keep going. Like, these guys are just different.
He was talking yesterday that he only had about 4.5 hours of sleep. Yesterday, he said he has a hard time in general sleeping in Las Vegas. He also likes to play cash while playing tournaments. All that stuff adds up. But then he also did say that once I start playing, I don't want to stop.
Yeah. So you guys can see here, Danny actually opted to do a 1-card draw to a 9-8. That is very unusual. And here we see, you know, Ivey actually drew 2 and now makes the wheel again, which he made a couple of times yesterday. And Jason actually makes a very strong hand as well. Jason makes number 7. So this is going to be interesting. Cool. And I think that given that Ivey drew 2, there's a good chance that Jason raises here, but he could also just call and snow and freeze to make Ivey stand pat with an inferior hand. But no, he's raising.
So snowing means that you are not trying to improve your hand anymore?
No, I meant freezing. Sorry, not snowing.
Right. Freezing as in not drawing any more cards, content with his current holding. Of course, you know, it's hard to improve on the 8-6. That's not a hand you're going to ever break.
Great situation for Ivey. 3 ways with the wheel.
600.
Ivey makes it 3 bets to go here.
And really, Jason, given that Ivey drew 2, has probably nowhere to go but call here, and would of course never break his hand, because he could, if he's wrong about throwing the 8, he would just give away so much equity, and then he could even, he would then hope to improve to a 7, which is really difficult. So he will never break his hand here, and he'll probably just end up calling down on the river, but we'll see.
Just for the Hold'em fans that are watching right now, how rare is it to make a wheel, a 7-5-4-3 deuce? Ivey here, for those unfamiliar, has the nuts. He has the royal flush of this game. It's unbeatable. He can only chop if Mercier makes the exact same hand, which we can see is not possible. Of course, Ivey stands pat. But how rare is it to see a wheel in this game? Does it happen a lot? Is it very uncommon?
It's definitely more common than aces or kings, because you have 3 draws to make your hand. Something like a pat wheel would be extraordinarily rare. So it's a hand that you'll make a couple of times maybe in the course of a tournament.
Can we get some cocktails over here? Yeah. Thanks.
But it's just a beauty. I mean, the feeling when you're drawing and you're squeezing your card, and then you see that, you know, the card nestles in to make the deuce 3, 4, 5, 7. It's a very special feeling in draw games.
I'm personally a huge fan of the draw games, just because the fact that your hand changes and you have so much control over that is a really fun way to play. Whenever it's part of a mixed game rotation, I'm always extra excited. And Mercier here now, faced with a bet. What are the hands outside of the wheel that Ivey takes this line with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there really isn't very... Ivey would bet every 7, but he drew 2 and so did Jason. And so there are probably some good 8s, maybe 8-6 perfect, maybe a hand like Jason's that he would bet here. That's what's going through Jason's mind, but he really probably isn't beating a lot of value here. Snow, meaning that Ivey stands pat with something like 3 deuces, 3 ways, with Danny having 3-bet pre-flop and drawing 1. It's also very ambitious, so that's all the stuff that's going through Jason's mind. But look, he's getting 15-1, and welcome to the
Thank you.
to the painful situations of limit players.
Yeah, so Mercier has to call 200K to win a pot. As you can see on the screen, it was already worth 3 million. Every bet counts.
And so maybe for the ones that are a little bit less familiar with the game, I used the term freeze before. So when Ivey raised, or in case Ivey shows aggression and bets out, if Jason doesn't raise that bet and just calls it with what is a very good hand, so he currently has the 7th best hand, that is called a freeze, because it typically induces the aggressor to stand pat with his hand. And what happens a lot of times is that, let's say in a situation when it goes draw 1, one person bets, shows the aggression, the other person just calls, you are now inducing that person to stand pat with a hand that is inferior. And that's why it's called freeze, is that you effectively freeze their hand.
And here it is. Mercier ends up making the call after much deliberation, and Phil Ivey with the early chip up. And you can see by the swing in stack sizes that these limit hands are just extremely valuable when they make it to showdown in a situation like this. Phil Ivey jumps up the counts now to 3.6 million, basically tied with Wong. For those that watched last night, you know the swings are massive. If you're down to just 1 or 2 bets, you can still make a massive comeback. That's also why this event is rather slow compared to other tournaments. Even though there's no split pots, it is still very hard to just run someone off the table.
I mean, in ways, unfortunate for Jason, he opened with 3-5-6, which is a hand you probably wouldn't open in a full ring game because you don't have the deuce. He got 3-bet by Danny, who had picked up on some of those tendencies with a very ambitious hand, 9-8-7. Ivey had a wheel draw, and Jason actually makes the 2nd best hand possible. He gets a deuce and an 8 for his hand, and then Ivey makes the wheel.
Limits right now are 100K, 200K. Wong with the raise to 200, and he picks this one up. As far as your experience playing against these 3 guys, how would you sort of, I don't want to say rank them, that's probably a bit unfair, but how would you describe their styles in this game and in this format?
I have not played a lot with Danny. As I was speaking to friends yesterday, we referred to him as the OG because he's been around for, I think, a very long time. He's probably the only guy also who wears a hat with a name inscribed on his side.
Him and Phil Hellmuth, the only 2.
That is interesting. That'll be good. That'll be a good kind of quiz. Who else wears hats?
Yeah, it always says D Wong on the side.
Jason is definitely quite studied in some of the big bet games.
Yeah, can I get a?
I also would describe him
ice green
almost
tea
as a
plain and a
natural.
cup of
I mean,
ice.
I've played with him a bunch in cash, and
Plain.
he's just so good. It's just kind of scary, to be honest. You could see that he tends to take a more aggressive line, like he V-pips more. He really gets in there.
2.5, right?
In Ivey, it's interesting. Like, he sort of marches a little bit to the beat of his own drum. He makes plays in all games, including No Limit, where we've seen him a lot on stream, that might be considered a little bit unorthodox. But, he has his own kind of system by which he plays, which is certainly different than many others, and he also has a different skill set. So, and there's just always something very special about Phil, I have to say. I think all of us that have been in poker for a while just look at him with a little bit of awe.
Does Phil play similarly in cash games and tournaments, or does he have like a very distinct tournament game and a very distinct cash game?
I think by and large, there tend to be similarities between the two, and that, again, he might not V-pip as much, and maybe play a style that you might consider even snug, but then he'll also make big adjustments against certain players because he picks up on stuff that other people do not pick up on.
It's always interesting to compare things like natural ability, talent, perhaps some old school reading abilities. Ivey's been around for the longest time of any of these three players, and combining that with fundamentals and things that we in air quotes have learned from the game evolving. Of course, that probably applies to a lesser extent to a game like Triple Draw. From you playing against Ivey, do you feel as though he keeps up with modern theory, or do you think that he is reliant upon experience first and foremost?
I do not know the answer whether he is keeping up with modern theory, but I would also, my guess is that if he did, he wouldn't do it to the extent that some of the elite players do, that really gain the insight from modern theory by going extremely deep on certain spots and changing certain variables and doing so almost every day. And so I don't think he does that. But whether or not he looked at solvers, when you play that much and when you are as perceptive of him, and that's true for other players like let's say Patrick or so on, you pick up on all the stuff that the theory sort of applies by watching others. And he's incredibly talented as that. And you see that also when new games are introduced in terms of how he's adapting to that. I don't think he's spending as much time on a solver as, say, Jason Kuhn.
10 hand fill, just the wheel. You
got a wheel?
You knew the fold.
Just now?
Yeah. You knew the fold. I called. Should have folded.
Donnie, can we please get a buddy cop movie of Mercier and Ivey?
I mean, it would be great. If anyone watched yesterday's stream, I mean, for the majority of the beginning of yesterday's stream, they were just watching the basketball game between the Celtics and the Mavericks and discussing their bets and sweating the action. And, it was just, it was almost like the poker was secondary for them, but they were still playing it and they were kind of on autopilot. And it was just very entertaining throughout. I would for sure watch some sort of, I think they talked about it yesterday on the stream, that if like the Travel Channel picked up these two, like just going around the world gambling on stuff, like it'd be just gold entertainment.
Yeah, we all know the, I believe it was ESPN who did a travel day with Ivey, hopping casinos. I mean, at this point, maybe 20 years ago, that with Ivey and Mercier would be an absolute blast to watch. It's good to have Mercier back, and I say that sort of, I don't know, half serious. Of course, he's been around, but he's not been the massive volume grinder chasing POI, chasing bracelets the way that he used to be doing that. He seems to have found a nice split between cash and tournaments. Do you think Mercier is at the top of his game? Back, let's say 5 years ago, we would all say easily him in the same breath as Ivey. He's been away from the grind for a while, but when you play against him, do you feel like this guy is as sharp as he's ever been?
Yeah, I really do. I was actually talking to someone who was saying, look, he's been gone for a while. He's never really been gone, but he's definitely not made sort of the trip for the whole series like he used to, and he definitely feels like he's at the top of his game. I'm a huge fan of improving your game, outside of the core technicals, and his physical transformation, is certainly not negatively affecting his game. So he's, to me, seems really as sharp as ever.
Well, it's good to have him back, and it's nice to have these guys both battling at the final table, and it almost makes us forget that Danny Wong has a big stack in front of him. He is our current chip leader, and you called him the OG. This guy's been around for a long time as well.
Yeah, speaking of cash, I think Jason played cash
I think I figured it out.
yesterday morning and this morning before hopping into this.
Miscounted what?
I was counting these as 8s instead of 10s because I was doing 8s yesterday. So like when I set up my stack here, I miscounted what it was. So it was probably right. I was probably right last night.
Way to go, Jason.
Mercier now admitting that the miscounting earlier was his own fault.
Take it, Danny.
Danny Wong, by the way, 5.1 million in career tournament earnings. Also has a bracelet himself. He won his bracelet online 2023. Has been close many times before in other formats as well.
Yeah, once took second place in this very event back in 2021.
Stack still plenty deep here, as we are three-handed with, you know, sort of one big pot separating the bottom stack from the top stack. I asked you this before we started streaming, but this game, still a popular game in high-stakes cash rotations in Vegas, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think you find it
Bracelet.
in the vast majority of mixed game rotations.
300.
I think people just enjoy playing it, to be honest. It's kind of one of these games, like when you ask to play limit hold'em, you got a very polarized opinion. But you know, it's pretty homogenous in terms of people just like the game flow, the gambling aspect of drawing games. You know, it's not too difficult to. It's kind of a game where it's relatively accessible when people feel they can play it well, even when they may not be able to. So I think it's quite popular still.
I've got a hand here between Wong and Ivey. Both players drawing one here, I believe, going into the last draw. Wong catches a jack. And please bear with us on the graphics. There's a lot of cards to process, so it might not always be as crisp and smooth and fast as with no limit hold'em when there's no card changes. And I guess that wasn't the last draw. Ivey still drawing.
What a bet.
As Wong. Yeah, I guess they're the stats and the graphics are just getting caught up here on the hand.
Well, it'd be interesting if Ivey really stood pat with a queen.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. Might be a wrong input there on the graphics.
200.
So Danny makes the 5th best hand possible, number 5. 8-5 or 8 perfect.
Right here. Everything right here. That's for you.
I wouldn't rule out if Ivey stood pat with a queen. You know, he did have a straight draw. It would be very unusual. But given how quickly he folded, it did seem like he didn't have a very strong holding.
So Ivey back down below 2 million. Wong up over 4.5. If you're catching us on YouTube right now, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We very much appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun doing the YouTube streams for you all. We have daily streaming on PokerGO this whole week. Right now, actually, the 3K6 Max is live on PokerGO as well. If you're looking for some no hold'em action, this is a 1-hour preview on YouTube, just to make you all familiar with the fact that we have this game. And we have Mr. Phil Ivey and Mr. Jason Mercier battling for bracelets. Now let's talk about, you know, starting hands in this game. Wong finds ace, ace, 8-6. Give us some insights into, you know, what a sort of a reasonable starting hand is in this game.
Yeah, this would definitely be good enough. I mean, you got, you know, the deuce in your hand. You got the 8. You got the 6. You know, you are drawing, you know, the worst 8, I think, is the 18th best hand. The best he can make is the 6th best hand, which is 8-6 perfect. So he, especially 3-ways and even a full ring game, has a hand that's good enough to open here. Jason defends with the 3 deuce. Again, that is pretty standard to have 2 cards to a wheel, so including a deuce, so deuce 3, deuce 4, deuce 5, deuce 7. To defend against, you know, a button open, which is wider. You might fold that against a very early position open in a full ring game. A lot of people would auto bet in his position here, whether or not independent of what you catch. Danny doesn't catch well. He catches an 8, which is good in terms of lowering the probability that your opponent catches that.
So with Danny checking there, I was always taught that if you're drawing fewer cards than your opponent and you're in position, you're always betting.
Yeah, I think that is the that is proper strategy in a cash game. I think there are some situations when you know that the opponent's range is very strong and where you don't catch a card that pairs, where you might consider checking. A tournament is a little bit different. That's the only reason why I think Danny checks here, is really just to reduce variance. But you know, the problem is that you are really giving away some sort of pure equity, because your range is just superior to the opponent's when you draw fewer cards than he does.
Disaster here from Mercier, as both players still draw 2. Mercier makes 10-7. Wong makes an 8-6. So while both players took 2, both players also made very strong hands. Mercier, of course, with a lead here. Probably, you know, assuming the fact that Wong is not going to have many made hands, and he wants to charge him for a potential 1-card draw going to the final street here. But Wong makes a real hand and raises. Now Mercier with a real decision.
Well, I think given that he now gets raised, This is one of the more difficult decisions. Oh, sorry, this is.
I was on the final draw. Sorry.
Got it.
I thought it was one draw to come.
If this was one draw to come, maybe assuming this had happened like on the turn, when you have a hand like a 9 or a 10 that leads and then you get raised, you can of course take that as a cue to break, but it's also sometimes a move designed by a weaker hand, like a weaker 10 or jack, precisely to make you then break a hand that's currently ahead. And so if that had happened on the turn, that would have been a difficult decision for Jason, given that he was drawing very pure below. He probably would have opted to throw away that 10 and try to make a better hand.
Yeah, apologies there on my behalf. I thought we had one draw left. I do still think that if they did have one draw left, Mercier is always leading there, making the 10-7 if both players drawing 2, right?
That's correct, yeah.
I have 4 cards.
He's the button, so you gotta give him one more card. Yeah. Now you can move the button. Yeah. Yeah. You're just moving out of the way for you to pitch.
Three low cards here for Ivey to 6-3 deuce. The 6 is a special card in this game.
Yeah, it is a special card. You know, generally it's sort of good and bad on balance. You know, it's a hand. If you look at Ivey, the deuce 3 and the 6 can make a straight, which would be a very bad hand. And if you make something like you catch a 7 and an 8, then you have an 8-7-6, which is a hand that sometimes might not be good enough to beat a value hand. But on balance pre-flop, 2-3-6 is a hand that you happily take on a button, and even more so three-handed. Card removal is really a thing in deuce to 7, unlike in other games, meaning that because, for example, some wheel cards, and particularly the deuce, are so important, you will see different opening ranges in a three-handed game than in a full ring game. So imagine a full ring game. Let's say there's 7 people, and the first 4 people fold. The likelihood that the remaining 3 people now have good cards, including a deuce, is higher, which means that your opening range on the button in a 7-handed game needs to be a little bit tighter than in a 3-handed game.
We have lots of people watching that are new to this game who have maybe never seen this game before. I'll try to do a quick run on every so often for the new people tuning in. You get 5 cards. It's a draw format. We play limit, so you cannot just go all in. There's 3 rounds of drawing and also 3 rounds of betting after those draws. And the goal is to make the lowest possible combination without making a flush or a straight. So 7-5, 4-3 deuce, meaning no straight, no flush. That would be the best hand. And then you go sort of up from there. 7-5, 7-6, and so on and so on. Ivey has not won a bracelet since 2014. Donnie, that was a funny one when he won that one, because you called me when he won that bracelet.
It's happening.
Well, I was in charge of the Poker News team at the time. Remko was on the team. We didn't have anyone to do any video, so we thrust Remko, gave him a microphone, stuck him in front of a camera, and said, "Go interview Ivey." Remko goes up there, sweating bricks. It was in the middle of this. We did a video series called Ivey Stories, because Ivey never wanted to be interviewed, and obviously Ivey's a big draw. So we said, well, let's just interview other people about Ivey. So we did this whole Ivey Story series, people just telling stories about Ivey, and in the middle of this winter interview, he actually calls out like the whole series and calls out Remko. He's like, "I've heard those stories. They're not all true."
The funniest moment was, first of all, this is 10 years ago. I was not doing commentary. I was not on camera a whole lot. This is when I first was sort of doing live reporting. So I sit down with Ivey, and of course Ivey wins a bracelet. There's 300 people watching, standing behind the camera that I'm talking to. And then we do the interview, and he's pretty relaxed, he's pretty happy. And right as I'm about to sign off and say, thank you for watching, he literally be like, hey, and he like leans into the microphone and he goes, "Don't believe all those Ivey stories." It was the funniest thing ever. But yeah.
That was 10 game, right?
10 game mix, correct? Yeah.
1,500.
Oh. Look at this, Ivey. With a hand with so much potential here, and then especially when you pair to deuce, you know that your opponent is less likely to have a deuce. Drawing 1 here, making the wheel on the wrong side.
Jack 9.
Jack Shannon's going to take this one down, and Ivey here getting short.
Yeah, it's funny with Phil. He likes to keep to himself a lot, including at the table, but he actually has a really, what I think is a great sense of humor. Sort of very dry. He has great sort of timing, and
Might be at Universal, but
once in a while you get that big old Phil Ivey smile.
the mummy ride's dope.
Oh
You
yeah.
gotta go on the mummy ride. I don't know if your kids are big enough, but that ride's dope.
We'll have to see.
And the Jurassic Park one, they like that one.
Okay, cool. Is this one mine?
You playing Bobby's earlier?
Yeah.
Who you guys
I like
playing?
how
Reset?
Jason said he was worried about sleep, and then he's just still waking up and playing cash. I mean, priorities, I guess.
I think he's on an East Coast dad schedule. So when he gets here, he'll usually be awake at like 4 in the morning, and he'll hit the gym first thing when it opens, a couple of Starbucks coffees deep, and then play cash as soon as that gets together. I do not know when he sleeps, actually. It's a good question.
I remember back many years ago when me and him chatted more than we do now. He would always talk about going down from his room to the cash game and play, then maybe take a little nap, continue playing, and just never wanting to give up his seat. I feel as though that's the life of, you know, a super high stakes player.
So maybe to interject here, so Phil opens with a very nice 2-card draw to 5-4 deuce with the deuce blocker, and Jason decides to 3-bet with the 9-7-6 1-card draw. So that's definitely an aggressive line. I think you could draw 2 to the 7-6-4. You didn't have the problem that you don't have a deuce, and you know there's a lot of runouts that could be problematic for you. And so another example of
Check.
Jason probably playing the hand differently than his 2 other opponents would have.
Mercier betting. Ivey comes with the call. Mercier paired, as you can see on the screen. Both players drawing 1. The beauty of this game all comes down to that final card so often. And Mercier catches an ace, Ivey catches a 9. Crucial pot here for Ivey as he's getting low on chips and he decides to bet his 9. What's sort of the worst hand you can bet here from Ivey's perspective?
You know, in a cash game, you can probably get as bad as a jack leading in the 1-1 position. You would lead a 9, and you would often also lead a 10. What's of course gross is leading in that spot and then getting raised. So depending on, you know, I usually use factors such as card removal and some element of randomness in terms of whether you're leading or when I have a strong hand. You know, you also do need to protect your checking range to be able to check raise for value. And again, when you get the right blockers, sometimes also bluffing. The 9 in this spot leading at 1-1 going into the river is relatively standard. What's unusual is that the way Jason played the hand, 3-betting, drawing 1, he was betting on the turn even though he was drawing 1, but he only had a 9-7 draw. Jason's range, he is projecting to be stronger than what he actually had. And despite that, Phil chose to lead out.
I don't know.
And Jason, even though he only had an ace, realizing that Phil could have paired a lot of his cards, chose to call down.
So can them 3s just sit right there? Them 3?
Pot went down.
Yeah, just you 3. Just a few of you guys. Or you 2. Thanks, man.
Wong comfortably in the lead here versus Ivey and Mercier.
Try. I don't know. They don't want like a lot of people spinning that.
These cards are flying up.
you're just tuning in, the Deuce to 7 Triple Draw is the name of the game. 10K Championship final table. You can see the names on the screen. Big names only in this event. We are live on YouTube for 1 hour. Then we go on over to our beloved fans on PokerGO, where we are already streaming as well, of course. We also have the 3K 6 Max live on PokerGO, not right now, so if you want a multi-table, today's a good day for it. If you're catching us on YouTube, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Shout out to Aaron Collins. $20 donation in the chat on YouTube. He's excited to come to Vegas for Easter. Aaron, we'll see you here. Always action in Vegas. Hope you get into some good games here. All right, back to the action here. Got a 3-bet pot here by the looks of it.
Yeah, so Danny 3-bets a button open with a 9-6 draw, which is on the aggressive line but standard. There are some 9s that we want to play from the get-go, and they're typically the ones where the cards below that are too connected or too high a risk of a straight draw. So the 9-6-5 is a good candidate for that. He catches the best card possible to make a 9-6-5-4 deuce. Ivey, unfortunately for him, catches the 4 and makes number 10 or 8-7 perfect.
Ivey stands pat. Obviously.
9-6.
Are you surprised to see him check behind here?
I'm a little surprised, especially with Danny checking. Generally speaking, when we have a draw one hand that stands pat, that is weaker than a draw 2 that reduces to draw 1 and then stands pat. There occasionally you'll show up with an 8-6 there, but he'll have a lot of inferior 8s and once in a while also a 9 that will pay off a bet on a river. That's a conservative line from Phil to check back 8-7 perfect there.
Good example there of how wild the swings are. Ivey was just down to almost below $1 million, now back up to 2.9. It's pretty intense, this game. Every single hand sways those chip counts. If you're just tuning in, my name is Remko Rinkema. Donnie Peters back in the booth after a stint on the IR. And we got Philip Sternheimer with us here. He finished 6th in this event. Also a regular in the cash games versus especially Jason and Phil. Have you guys been playing a lot this summer?
We have been playing. We started at the end of May, and the game has been pretty much running every day.
Wow. What are you guys playing?
So we played a 10-game mix. So horse, deuce to 7 triple draw. This particular game, no limit hold'em, PLO, Badugi, deuce to 7 single draw, and then deuce to 7 Raz, and the pot limit version of this deuce to 7 triple draw. The game is public. It is available to anyone. It's currently at a private salon at the Bellagio in the Baccarat section. Starts at 9:30, 9:45. Limits are 3,000, 6,000. So if you want a seat, show up tomorrow morning.
See, this is the beauty. Like, he's inviting everyone watching YouTube on PokerGO. If you want to sit down, there is a seat open for you to play with.
I noticed on because Patrick Antonis sometimes puts out stories, and it didn't look like Bobby's room.
Right.
The other day, and I was like, where are they playing? So that's interesting to hear that it's moved.
They are there's 2 very regular no limit games that have been playing in Bobby's room for a long time now, throughout the entire course of the year. And that certainly makes the atmosphere a little noisier, and that's I think a couple of players in the game felt it might be more enjoyable to have more sort of, I wouldn't say privacy, I would just say quietness, because you would actually love the game to be sort of out in the public domain. But I can tell you that over the years, it's very rare that the man with the suitcase shows up and suddenly sits down in a game of this size. So when the people that do want to play the game are interested, they know where it is.
I mean, all our YouTube audience is now going to show up, pull their money together, and get themselves a seat. Take us back to your first time ever playing in Bobby's room specifically, because I can only imagine that prior to you playing in it, you heard about it, you knew about the characters, and you were aware of sort of the mystique surrounding that space, especially as a poker fan, or was for you that not as big a deal as it would be for some of us who will never get a chance to play there?
No, look at it. It absolutely was, as you would expect. I was working in finance up until last year, so I was a serious recreational player. Danny with an extremely strong pat hand, about as good as you can get here. And I can imagine that. Let's see what Jason.
Yeah.
I'll come back to your question.
Right.
We'll see if Jason keeps the 9 here and is drawing dead or draws 3 here. He's drawing 3.
And with Danny Wong staying pat, Mercier will have to improve quite significantly to really want to even continue here.
Yeah, well, he catches a key card, which is the deuce. So he'll probably call this. And given that he threw 2 9s and now sees another 9, it is very unlikely that Danny has a 9, so he will pitch that 9, knowing that he's up against an 8 or better. And for Jason, of course, now, this is the nature of this game. He's down to, started the hand with about a million. He is down to 850 now. He catches a very good card, both a blocker and a 7. But if he loses this pot, you know, he'll be down to 650.
So Mercier, for those unfamiliar with the game, started with a whole bunch of nothing. Keeps improving here on the first and second draw, despite the fact that Wong has a pat hand from the start, and Wong again, of course.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, because we are on the
key card for Jason coming up here.
Yeah, absolutely. For his tournament, a key card here. We're going to see it pop up on the screen, and it is a queen. So Jason whiffs on this final draw, and he knows the bad news here.
The worst card would have been an 8, where he could potentially maybe even go for certainly a bet of check 2, or maybe even a raise, given that a lot of pat 8s are worse than 8-7 perfect, but you know, he catches the second worst card, which is any card that is not an 8. And he can get away from it here, unless, of course, what is going through Jason's mind, the pot is 1.5 million, you know, is there a possibility that Danny is snowing? Now, he has seen 2 deuces. That's a key snow card. 8 would be the second best one, but he decides that is too much of a stretch.
So Danny Wong gets a little richer. Jason Mercier now really in the danger zone. Yeah, back to your first Bobby's Room experience. I'm curious what that was like.
Yeah, so the first time I played in Bobby's Room, I was traveling through town for a day, and I think I messaged a player in a game, and there was nothing going on, so they lowered the stakes. I think it was 500, 1,000, and to my delight and to my surprise, I felt, you know, I was winning in the game, but more importantly, I sort of felt competitive. And then over the summer, I was playing a 600, 1,200 game, which was in Bobby's, and I won that, and then I had enough for sort of 1.5 buy-ins in a big game, which was 2,000, 4,000 at the time. And, you know, you got to take shots sometimes. And I did the irresponsible thing and, you know, put sort of my bankroll on the line for that game. And again, to my delight, ended up doing well in that game in that summer, and again, sort of felt I'm not an EV positive player in the game, but I can learn and I can compete. And use that as a prompt to start, you know, improving in many of the games where I felt weaker, and that was sort of my story. And, you know, one of the great things, of course, about poker is that, given the balance of skill and luck, but also some other dynamics that people underestimate, you know, that sort of skills outside of core poker skills that come into play, that, you know, you can play with some of your childhood heroes, and so and it's just great to see guys like the three of them who've been in this game for, you know, 15, 20 plus years and still compete at the top.
Big hand here developing potentially between Ivey and Mercier. Ivey keeps sort of dancing around making a hand. Mercier here.
Well, he has a pair of 6s right now and a straight draw, so
actually goes check check. Both players draw 1. So we're done drawing here. Let's see what these guys end up with.
Yeah, so Ivey would make a straight with a... There's a good possibility that you don't see what Phil actually caught here. Jason makes a pair of 3s. So he does beat bluffs. Because if Phil is bluffing, then he would probably do that with a higher pair.
Yeah, so Donnie, Ivey has not been showing his card to the scanner correctly all the time.
Shocker.
Shocker, right?
You don't want to go out and tap it on the shoulder.
Yeah.
Hey,
Oh, man. Yeah, so this is not Ivey's hand. He doesn't have sixes. He tossed the 6. We don't know what card he got back for it. We do know that Mercier caught a 3. I feel as though when he first looked at his cards, he was about to snap his sunglasses in half. A little bit of that instant frustration when you catch a 3.
yeah. If Jason had just seen the 7, 6, 5, 4 in Phil's hand, he would snap call because there's a lot of very bad cards Phil could catch. And, 4, 5, 6, 7 would be a high pair, a 3 or an 8 would be a straight. And so there aren't actually a lot of cards other than a deuce, a 9, and maybe a 10 that are for value here. Of course, Jason doesn't know that.
So from that perspective, the way you just analyzed that, does it also make this an automatic bluff for Ivey?
Yes, that's why I think a lot of his bets here will not be for value because those would be, 2s, 9s, and 10s. And a lot of cards would be bluffs.
So Mercier in the tanky with a pair of 3s. You might be learning this game for the first time and you're thinking, I got to make a low. A pair of 3s is not very low. But as Phil just explained, Ivey could have paired his 7, his 6, his 5, his 4. A 3 or an 8 would make him a straight. Of course, 3 less likely since Mercier has 2 of them.
Now, Jason did a great job based on the few hands that I saw yesterday sniffing out these bluffs from Phil. So we are in just as much suspense as Jason is. What does Phil actually have? We have a little bit more information than he does. But we'll see if Jason makes the correct decision here.
So is there any sort of triple draw math that these guys, and then perhaps yourself as well, are running in spots like this? Because if it is indeed a situation where you assume Ivey is always betting, bluffs or value, is there an equation you can run for yourself to determine whether 3s are a call?
Yeah, it's less about, clearly the odds will always, the pot odds will dictate some of the decision, and what you're really thinking about is one is card removal, is what are the cards that I have seen. So you would, for example, prefer not seeing 8s and 7s, because those are the cards that a lot of times people have, those are the big pairs that people bluff with, because if I had a pair of 4s, maybe Ivey checks, hoping that Jason made a higher pair. If I've seen a lot of deuces, I know that the likelihood that someone else has a strong hand is lower, and the likelihood to have a straight, which is very bad, is also higher. So that's some of the, those are some of the factors that we tend to take into account when we make our decision.
Mercier here with the massive decision. You can see the chip counts on the screen. He only has 355 left. He has to call 200K to find out. He decides to fold. The question now is Ivey going to flash that card on the reader, or are we forever going to be in suspense here? He's not going to show it. Always.
Let's give him a 1 raw penalty.
The funny thing.
Good. No?
Okay, well, Ivey just,
You drawing dead?
No, it's
With made hand?
well, yeah, I guess.
Ivey just claims that
Once he made it.
his bet was, he was beating a pair of 3s.
It's funny how
Well, he said Jason asked him if he made an 87, and he said it wouldn't have been good. So,
deuce,
yeah, I guess.
See?
right?
I mean, unless Ivey's lying.
I mean, I didn't follow the hand on every street, but I didn't see any deuces folded, so it is possible.
All right, here's a good hand for Mercier to get aggressive with.
155 behind.
355 total.
Yeah.
A draw 1. We'll see if Danny goes with the 7-3 here.
Cool.
He'll probably have to, just because there isn't a lot behind here. So
Alright,
they'll
so-
go 1 and draw 3. And Jason is in pretty good shape here to double up.
Yeah, likely going to see an all-in showdown here. Mercier drawing 1. Danny Wong going to try to improve. He's got 3 chances to improve. He needs 3 cards to start here on the very first draw. Mercier sweating it hard here as he makes a 10-8. Now,
Well, yeah.
the question becomes, what do we break in if Wong does a certain thing? And in this specific case, Wong's going to draw 3 again.
I think he'll pitch to 10.
Is that also a factor of position here? If he was in position over Danny, he can obviously see what Danny does first and go from there.
That's a great point, Donnie. If the situations were reversed and he was in position and then Danny was drawing 3 again, then he would keep the 10.
So now Mercier makes an ace. Of course, his hand gets worse. We can see that Wong picked up an additional card to hold.
All right, so Jason goes in here as a favorite.
And here we are going to show down the cards with one draw remaining.
Oh,
I'll go first.
that's it for Danny. Jason's going to double up.
Yeah,
No
Mercier
spot
catches a
save.
3. That is impossible to beat for Wong.
I guess I went 3-side diamond, 4-side diamond.
50-50 to win.
Okay.
Or
You're,
deuce.
yeah, you're 50-50. Anyway.
Got it.
GG. I mean, not GG.
Good
NH.
NH.
NH. Yeah.
One of the best parts about the mixed games is the sweating, especially in the draw games, you know, on the end.
Yeah.
Always love it.
I was
like,
accused by Alan Kessler to sweat my cards too slowly. I do the baccarat squeeze from the top first, so I see if there's
Sounds perfect.
There's one spot. I mean, it's
50-50
just so
right
much
there,
fun
huh?
to squeeze your cards that way.
50-50 to win 100%. But if you pair, I win.
You first check at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
top
but once
if
I roll
there's
the jack.
one
Yeah,
dot,
once you roll the
that
jack,
means
then.
it's a deuce or a 3, or if there's 2 dots, then it's a 4, 5, 6.
As long as I don't pair, it doesn't matter.
It's a 4 through a 10.
Well, I guess
That's
you might
half
have
the
ace.
fun of these games.
You had
This is a
you
sweat.
had ace or you saw spot already?
Absolutely.
I looked at a spot. Also, the spade is like, you kind of see the ace of spades.
Yeah, because it's fat.
They should charge you guys double the rake for destroying all these cards. All right, Mercier back in the game, still the short stack, but he's got some more breathing room. By the way, if you're catching us on YouTube, this is a 1-hour free preview. We've got 8 minutes left here on our YouTube preview. If you're new to PokerGo, subscribe right now. Use promo code WSOP24YT to save $20 on your annual subscription. That is WSOP24YT to save $20 on the annual sub. You can also, of course, get the monthly or the quarterly. But let me advise you, just get the annual. We got the World Series Poker still rolling until July 17th. We got everyday coverage of the main event, and we got a new season of high stakes poker dropping right after the main event. So tons and tons of poker action still to come on PokerGo.com. We're working around the clock to provide you with tons of the best coverage. So hopefully you can support us on that journey to bring the best in poker. And we got tons more mixed games coming too, Donnie. We got lots of 50K coverage.
Yeah, we're doing multiple days of the 50K PPC. I'm sure you'll be in there, Phil.
I will be in there, yes. I got eliminated the last hand of day 1 last time, including expletives and knocking over my chair.
Never fun.
That's the right tournament for that kind of reaction.
It really is.
Mercier here, 8-6-5-4.
Yes, so
Knew you were
Jason
taking one.
chooses the conservative line here with a draw one
Maybe a
hand
more play
that
game.
I think in a lot of other stages of the tournament he would have 3-bet. And one of the reasons he did that is because he does have a straight draw, which unfortunate for him is coming in. And so his range looks a little weaker than it is, but he's also sort of telegraphing that he doesn't have a very premium draw one hand by not 3-betting the open.
Yeah, you can see here,
You're like 4.
Mercier makes a
Yeah.
straight, so he has to
5.
draw again, and
Or 5,
improves to a
5,
9-8. That's a showdown hand.
That is a showdown hand that he will now, because it's too risky to again draw to the straight, he will probably just keep that. And Danny is going to call with a draw 1, and my guess is Jason will check this.
Yeah, check to preserve his stack, because of course he could get raised all in on the river if Wong does make his hand. Wong drawing 1.
He's padding here, Jason. And,
Oh my god.
oh, he's actually betting.
Oh wow.
And it's going to be interesting. Danny with the best hand.
Danny.
Doesn't beat a lot of value. And this is and Jason, of course, is betting pretty much all of his stack. This is going to be very interesting.
Disgusting spot here for Mercier. Wong with the 9-8 perfect. He's got him out-kicked.
Now again, what is also going through Danny's mind, he was drawing 1, but not 3-betting. So there are some snows in there. But what Jason could have also been doing is, given that his stack, he just could play a premium hand in a sort of deceptive way, because the money is going in anyway, as it is now. I wouldn't be surprised if Danny folds this hand, because it really doesn't beat a lot of value.
But Danny's never folding, right?
No, I do think that Danny is considering folding.
Wow.
The best hand, because he thinks that which value hand is 9-8 really beating?
If you're in Jason's shoes right now, are you feeling like you want to call at this point, or you don't want to call at this point?
That's an interesting question, Donnie. The hand is just playing in such an unorthodox way, with him not 3-betting a draw 1, and now leading 9-8-6, which against draws that have come in for Danny really shouldn't be winning. So this is a merge, really. You would describe that. This is a hand that can beat, you know, hands that are bluff catchers, but as behind really most value hands.
Crucial spot here
And
for
it might
Mercier.
just work out for Jason. If
Yeah.
I had to bet, I would think that Danny's going to fold.
Wow, and Wong does fold, and Mercier picks up the chips here. Absolutely incredible stuff
Wow.
here. Nice analysis,
Wow.
Phil. Wow.
Maybe.
That one maybe?
Water cocktails, gentlemen.
I think Jason probably knows that he might have been bluffing with the best hand.
I think based on how long Danny took to fold, he realizes that he might have gotten away with one here.
And here's a look at the payouts. Philip Sternheimer joining us in the booth. Got $55,000, and here we are playing for $347,000. But Phil, let me ask you this: for guys like Mercier and Ivey, is the tournament play almost strictly for the accolades?
Yeah, I don't think that they're looking a lot at the payout jumps in a tournament like this. I mean, you know, compared to cash games, the stakes here just pale in comparison.
Yep.
So I really think this is for the glory. This is for the enjoyment of competing in these MTTs, and potentially also for side bets that some of them might have put on, which will typically far exceed the size of the prize pools here.
Have we heard any gossip of side bets? I know normally they're pretty
So
well
that's-
publicized, but haven't heard much about Jason and Ivey
Yeah.
particularly this year.
Yeah, no, I really doubt Jason has put on side bets, certainly at the beginning of the series, given that he wasn't sure like how much he was going to play. You know, with Phil, you never know. It's the same thing with the fantasy draft every year that we do. It's always a big question, like how many events is Phil going to play? But I'm not aware, and you're absolutely right that most of these are sort of well publicized in advance, and add a ton of excitement and also pressure to the series for those that actually engage in them.
All right, so we got lots of 8s and 7s on the screen here. Ivey and Mercier going head to head. Ivey raised, then Mercier 3-bet. Ivey called. Ivey took 2, Mercier took 2, and it was a bet from Mercier and a call. Then on the second draw, they both took 1. Actually went check, check, and here we are picking it up on the final street. Are you surprised?
One.
They both have very similar draws here. Ivey a little weaker, but in position.
And there it is, 1 and 1 again. Are you surprised Mercier is a little passive here with the deuce in his hand? Or is the draw simply not warrant any betting?
He just caught the jack and now goes probably into a check call line.
Ivey shows the 9 first to indicate that that's his highest card. Mercier again with the toss there.
Yeah. In this case, Jason chose the conservative check call line with a okay hand like a jack-8. If he had led, he would have just gotten called by Phil, so it's the same outcome. There are some situations where Ivey will check behind a weaker hand where Jason wouldn't get value, but I think that a check call 1-1 going into the last draw, making a jack-8 out of position is perfectly standard, and a little bit of a bad beat for Jason that Phil drew there.
All right, this is the final hand of our free coverage on YouTube. Let me remind you once again, WSOP 24 YT is our promo code to save $20 on the annual sub. We hope to see you on PokerGO.com as we continue this event until a winner is known. We are multi-tabling on PokerGO. We also have a 3K 6-max no-limit event streaming right now, so tons of action going on here at the Horseshoe in Las Vegas. There it is. This hand's very uneventful. So I want to thank you all on YouTube for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow with more streaming on YouTube as well. Donnie and I will be covering the $800 deep stack final table, so plenty more action still to come. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on PokerGO.com.
Raise.
Great.
All right, much love to everyone.